During my wedding, my stepsister suddenly announced, "Tonight, the bride will serve us dinner." To my shock, my parents joined in, and everyone laughed at me. Suddenly, Groom stood up and said, "Then accept my gift for the bride's sister. I am canceling all the $44 million contracts with your company." Now she is begging. I sat in front of the full-length mirror, watching as the makeup artist applied the finishing touches to my face. The morning sun streamed through the large bridal suite window at the Drake Hotel, casting a soft golden glow across the room. My wedding dress, pristine and pure white, hung delicately on its special hanger, swaying slightly as if caught in an invisible breeze. The intricate lace pattern shimmered under the sunlight, each thread catching the light like tiny angel wings. I had envisioned this day so many times, imagined every detail, rehearsed every step in my mind. But now that the moment was here, the nerves settling deep in my stomach were more intense than anything I had ever anticipated. "Amy, lift your chin just a little," the makeup artist instructed gently. I exhaled slowly, following her direction, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I had worked so hard to reach this moment. Long, exhausting night shifts as a pediatrician, emergency surgeries that kept me awake for days, holidays spent in hospital corridors rather than at home with family, but I had persevered through it all. And now, I was here sitting in front of this mirror, minutes away from walking down the aisle. My mother stood beside me, meticulously smoothing out the barely noticeable wrinkles in my dress. Her movements were precise, each one a reflection of the perfectionism she had cultivated over her 62 years. She always believed that attention to detail was a sign of discipline, and she carried that belief into every aspect of her life. Across the room, my younger sister Sharon sat on the window-side sofa, scrolling through her smartphone. Her glossy blonde hair caught the sunlight, making her profile appear almost ethereal. She looked striking, like she could have been a model on the cover of a fashion magazine. But something about her posture, the way she kept shifting in her seat, made me uneasy. "Sharon, are you okay?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. "Oh, yeah, I'm totally fine," she replied dismissively, barely glancing up from her phone. Her words didn't convince me, but before I could press further, my mother started discussing last-minute details with a hairstylist. She seemed completely unbothered by Sharon's restless behavior, brushing it off as just another one of my sister's unpredictable moods. She had always excused Sharon's emotional swings, chalking them up to youthful personality traits, but I knew my sister. Something wasn't right. Our family had a long-standing legacy in the medical field. The Edwards had been physicians for generations, dating back to my great-grandfather's time in Los Angeles. My father, a highly respected chief of surgery at a renowned hospital, had carried that tradition forward with pride, performing some of the most complex surgical procedures. Growing up, he had been especially demanding of me, his eldest daughter. He expected nothing but excellence, and, even during the holidays, my time was spent buried in medical textbooks rather than out with friends. In contrast, my mother had always been more lenient with Sharon. "She's your younger sister," she would say whenever I pointed out the unfairness. And, despite my frustration, I always took care of Sharon, always tried to be the responsible older sister. I still vividly remember the day I received my medical school acceptance letter. My father, a man rarely given to displays of emotion, had tears in his eyes. It was the proudest I had ever seen him. But Sharon? She had stormed off, shouting, "It's always about big sister," before locking herself in her room. That day, something shifted between us, something I couldn't quite define. And now, as I watched her out of the corner of my eye, fidgeting restlessly on the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had begun that day had only grown deeper over the years. It was years later, amidst the chaos of hospital shifts and patient consultations, that I met Justin. It happened in a conference room at Los Angeles Children's Hospital during a medical malpractice consultation. I still remember that moment so clearly, how the atmosphere of the room seemed to change the instant he walked in. At 6 feet tall, with an air of quiet confidence, he carried himself with the composure of a man who knew his place in the world. "Dr. Edward, if you could review these documents," he'd said, his voice steady and professional. "Yes, Mr. Tyler," I had replied, taking the papers from his hands. Our paths continued to cross in weekly meetings and by chance at nearby cafes. Slowly, I found myself drawn to him. He had an intellect honed at Princeton and the University of Los Angeles, but it wasn't just his intelligence that captivated me. It was the way he spoke, his genuine kindness, his unwavering dedication to helping others. Then came our first dinner date at a charming Italian restaurant in Los Angeles's River North district. He had smiled at me over a glass of wine, a hint of shyness in his expression. "A doctor and a lawyer," he mused. "An unexpected combination, isn't it?" "Maybe, but both professions exist to help people," I had replied. Something in his eyes softened at my words. And that was when I knew. It wasn't just his career or his accomplishments. It was him. His sincerity, his thoughtfulness, his ability to make me feel like I was truly seen. I had fallen for Justin Tyler not because he was a successful medical malpractice attorney but because he was a man of integrity. Now, sitting in front of the mirror, I looked at my reflection. My shoulder-length chestnut hair cascaded in soft waves. My makeup was flawless, enhancing my features without overpowering them. The tiara my mother had chosen for me rested gently on my head, catching the light and casting a delicate glow. I should have felt nothing but happiness, but the lingering unease in my chest wouldn't fade. Sharon sighed heavily, shifting in her seat yet again. She kept checking her phone, her fingers tapping restlessly against the screen. "Sharon, are you sure you're okay?" I asked again. She forced a smile. "I'm fine. Don't worry. Today is your special day, isn't it?" There was something off about the way she said it, something hollow in her tone. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. The moment had arrived. The heavy doors of St. Patrick's Church swung open, and the grand, majestic sound of the pipe organ filled the air. The Gothic-style church, with its over a century-old history, seemed to shine brighter today. A long crimson carpet stretched down the aisle, leading to the altar. White wooden pews on either side were filled with 250 guests, all dressed in their finest attire, their expressions solemn and expectant. Medical colleagues, legal professionals, prominent figures from Los Angeles elite, all eyes were on me. The weight of their gazes pressed down on my shoulders. The altar was adorned with pure white roses and baby's breath, their fragrance delicate, yet intoxicating. Sunlight streamed through the towering stained glass windows, casting rainbow-colored patterns across the marble floor. This was my moment. Everything was supposed to be perfect, but as I took my first step forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The stained glass, crafted in 1912, vividly depicted the Virgin Mary's compassionate expression. The colors gleamed under the sunlight filtering through, adding an almost ethereal glow to the church. As we completed the final check in the bridal waiting room, my father extended his right arm toward me. At that moment, my heart pounded heavily. His arm, strong yet delicate, bore the experience of thousands of surgeries he had performed as a surgeon. Through my veil, the scene before me felt like a dream. At the end of the aisle stood Justin, his deep navy tuxedo fitting him perfectly. He looked like he had stepped straight out of a movie scene, his proud expression easing some of my nervousness. My mother, seated in the front row, beamed in her elegant emerald green dress. At 62, she carried herself with Amy, appearing far younger than her years. Beside her sat Sharon. In contrast to her earlier restlessness, she now wore a perfect smile. Her champagne gold bridesmaid dress enhanced her beauty even more, but I noticed the subtle tremble in her hands. "Dad," I whispered. He nodded gently, his eyes misty. My father, always strict as both a doctor and a surgical chief, had tears in his eyes today. His expression reminded me of the day he first learned of my acceptance into medical school. The organ's melody resonated through the historic church, built in 1846, and to the sound of Mendelssohn's Wedding March, we began our slow walk. The weight of the guests' gazes was heavy, each step taking me further into my new life. Before the priest, Justin and I exchanged our vows. Our hands, placed on the Bible, felt each other's warmth. "I vow to love, honor, and cherish you," Justin said, his voice trembling slightly. It was unusual to hear him like this. His confident courtroom demeanor was gone, replaced by raw emotion. "I vow to love, honor, and cherish you," I replied, my voice steady, but full of feeling. Warm applause filled the church. Through my veil, I saw my mother wiping away tears. The moment was perfect, everything I had ever dreamed of. After the ceremony, in the limousine heading to the Drake Hotel, Justin gently held my hand. The Los Angeles cityscape gleamed under the May sunlight as we drove north on Michigan Avenue. The anticipation of our new life together filled the air between us. "We're really married now," I murmured. "Yes. It's the perfect day," he said with a soft smile. In the back seat, Sharon sat staring at her phone again, her fingers moving rapidly across the screen. I couldn't shake the uneasiness creeping into my chest. Who was she messaging? And why did she seem so tense? The Gold Coast room on the top floor of the Drake Hotel, established in 1920, was decorated lavishly in gold and white. True to its name, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting light like stardust across the room. 20 round tables, each seating 10 guests, were adorned with white roses and hydrangeas as centerpieces. The pure white tablecloths gleamed under the candlelight, and the tableware was arranged to perfection, accompanied by rows of premium champagne. Everything was flawless. As the staff finished serving the Maine lobster salad, my father stood for the toast. The room fell silent in anticipation. "Thank you all for joining us today. I am proud to have raised Amy to become an excellent physician. Since childhood, she has found joy in helping others. I couldn't be happier that she has found Justin, a man who shares her dedication to serving others. Just as the mushroom bisque was being served, something unexpected happened. Sharon suddenly stood up, unsteadily clutching a champagne glass in her trembling hand. Her cheeks were flushed, her expression unreadable. "May I say something too?" she asked, her voice loud and clear. Before anyone could respond, she forcefully took the microphone from a staff member. A defiant smile stretched across her lips, but something about it felt off. A chill ran down my spine. Instinctively, I sensed something terrible was about to unfold. "Hello, everyone. I'm Sharon, the sister," she began, laughing brightly. It was an unnatural, almost painful laugh, the kind that masked something much darker beneath the surface. She was famous for her social media presence, a well-known influencer with 50,000 followers always displaying the perfect life. But now, there was an unusual tension in her voice. "Today, our beloved sister married a wonderful man," she continued. "But, everyone, we forgot to introduce tonight's waitstaff." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Even the chandeliers, light, seemed frozen in time. "It's perfect practice for being a bride, isn't it?" she said, her voice dripping with bitterness. "After all, that's the only kind of work suitable for big sister, right?" A thick silence weighed down the room. Guests exchanged confused glances. My father's voice, low and commanding, broke through the tension. "Sharon." My mother's face had gone pale. Bridesmaids murmured in hushed shock. Then, Justin slowly stood up. He didn't speak at first, but his movements alone commanded attention. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone, his expression cool and determined, the same expression he wore in court as a medical malpractice attorney. He nodded to the staff, and in response, a large screen descended at the front of the room. "Then let me make a surprise announcement for my sister-in-law," Justin said calmly. Sharon froze. The color drained from her face. Her champagne gold dress, which had once reflected light beautifully, now seemed to mirror her fear. The guests turned their attention to the screen, curiosity lighting their eyes. My heart began to pound fiercely. I could guess what was about to happen, and I knew it wouldn't be an easy development. The projector startup sound echoed through the silent room. The mechanical whir filled the space as the lights dimmed, transforming the Drake Hotel's Gold Coast room into an impromptu theater. The crystal chandeliers, once gleaming in golden brilliance, were reduced to a faint glow, casting long, uneasy shadows across the room. A heavy stillness settled over the guests, their breaths held in anticipation of what was about to unfold. Justin remained standing, his posture rigid, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by the sharp intensity he carried in the courtroom. His fingers moved across his smartphone with the precision of a pianist, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding before us. "Actually," he began, his voice carrying across the room with practiced confidence, "throughout our wedding preparations, Sharon has been making inappropriate advances toward me." Soft gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, her wide eyes darting between Sharon and Justin. My father squeezed his eyes shut as if trying to block out the weight of the revelation. "I have kept all the evidence, which I would like to share now," Justin continued, his voice steady, controlled, devoid of emotion. The first image appeared on the screen, a screenshot of a social media direct message. The white background and black text burned into my vision. "Don't you think I'm more attractive than my sister?" The timestamp read 2 a.m. Another message appeared. "Want to meet secretly? I won't tell anyone." The room buzzed with hushed whispers. This message had been sent the night of our engagement announcement. The next text, sent a month before the wedding, made my stomach twist. Big sister would never understand me. Sharon's face turned ghostly pale. With every new message displayed, her champagne gold dress seemed to shimmer with tension rather than elegance. The guests watched in fascinated horror as the evidence continued to unfold before them. Then came the photos. Late-night selfies sent in secret, provocative poses with captions like, "What do you think of me like this?" A strangled sob escaped my mother's lips. She turned away, unable to look at the screen any longer. My father's shoulders sagged, his composure as a surgeon cracking ever so slightly. The bridesmaids exchanged uneasy glances, some looking at Sharon with barely concealed fury, others with pity. Justin scrolled to his own responses. "This is inappropriate. Please refrain from such contact. I will never betray Amy. If this continues, I will have to take legal action." His replies were professional, firm, and clear. They served both as warnings and irrefutable proof of his loyalty. He had saved everything. He had told me everything. And I, believing in my sister, had chosen to keep it quiet until now. Sharon's breathing turned erratic. The carefully constructed poise of her social media influencer persona shattered. Her hands curled into fists, her knuckles white against the dim light. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. Then louder, "That's not true." She shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor with a screech. Her voice no longer held the perfectly curated charm of an online personality. It was raw, shrill, and exposed nerve. "It's all eyes. All of it." But the evidence on the screen said otherwise. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, her bridesmaid dress fanning around her like crushed flower petals. "I hate you, big sister," she sobbed, her voice breaking. Her mascara streaked down her face in dark trails, her perfectly composed image now in ruins. The room held its breath. No one dared to move or speak. "Always perfect," Sharon choked out. "Always loved by everyone. I was always in your shadow." Tears streamed down her face as years of resentment and jealousy poured out of her. The humiliation of my medical school acceptance, the constant comparisons, the desperate need to be seen, to be chosen, everything burst forth like a dam breaking. "Just this one person," she whispered brokenly, shaking her head. "Just this one person. I wanted to steal." Her confession hung in the air like a heavy fog. 250 guests stood frozen, their expressions shifting between shock, pity, and discomfort. Among them, medical colleagues wore expressions of understanding, perhaps recognizing the psychological turmoil unraveling before them. The lawyers in the room remained stoic, calculating the legal implications of what had just transpired. My parents were the starkest contrast of all. My father, who had spent years maintaining composure in the operating room, now sat motionless, his hands trembling ever so slightly. My mother, a woman who had always prided herself on social grace, wept into a handkerchief, mumbling repeated apologies under her breath. The bridesmaids fidgeted, their earlier excitement now completely drained. They looked at Sharon with a mixture of anger and sympathy, unsure of how to react. The wedding's celebratory atmosphere had disintegrated. I inhaled deeply, grounding myself. My wedding dress felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of every memory, every moment leading up to this disaster. Then, I stood. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet but firm. "Sharon, let's end this." She turned her swollen, tear-streaked face toward me, her expression a twisted mix of regret and defiance. "I have always watched over you," I continued, "because you are my sister. But, I cannot forgive what happened today." Each word was deliberate. Each word was final. "This is your final warning." The room was silent. "Never approach us again." Sharon let out a strangled sound. Her body seemed to fold in on itself as she collapsed onto a nearby sofa, drained of all strength. My mother began crying anew, and my father released a long, weary sigh. Beside me, Justin remained still, his presence a pillar of unwavering strength. He met my gaze, and in his eyes, I found the reassurance I needed. This was our decision. This was our line in the sand. And, we had crossed it together. At 4 p.m., we returned to the Gold Coast room. The atmosphere had shifted. It would never be the same as before, but it had evolved into something more profound. A warm applause welcomed us, and the guests' faces reflected understanding and encouragement rather than lingering discomfort. The reception carried on, subdued yet resilient. Our first dance began as Etta James's At Last played softly in the background. Justin gently led me across the floor, his arms secure around me. Despite everything, I felt safe. We had made it through the storm, and as I looked up at my husband, I knew that we would face whatever came next, together. As the evening came to a close, the weight of the day settled upon us. The Drake Hotel's Gold Coast room, once filled with tension, now carried a different energy, one of quiet understanding, of new beginnings. Justin's hand remained firmly in mine as we exchanged parting words with the remaining guests. Our parents, though emotionally drained, managed small, heartfelt smiles. The final family photos were taken, Sharon's absence a noticeable void, yet also a release from the weight of unspoken truths. Standing at the entrance of the venue, we faced a shower of rice as our guests cheered, sending us off into the night. As I walked hand in hand with Justin toward the waiting white limousine, I knew we had lost something that day, perhaps a version of our family that I had once believed could be whole. But in its place, we had gained something greater: clarity, freedom, and a love that had been tested and proven unshakable. Justin's arm wrapped protectively around me as we settled into the limousine, our fingers entwined. The city lights flickered past the tinted windows, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I allowed myself to truly exhale. "We'll overcome everything together from now on," Justin murmured, pressing a soft kiss against my temple. I turned to him, smiling through the remnants of emotion still clinging to me. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll be fine with you." Our honeymoon in Maui was a dreamscape of sun-drenched beaches and quiet, intimate moments. The rhythm of the ocean, the warmth of the sun against my skin, and the presence of the man I loved made everything else fade into the background. We allowed ourselves to simply be, no expectations, no lingering shadows of the past. In those days, we healed. We laughed over fresh fruit and coconut cocktails, explored waterfalls hidden in lush forests, and danced barefoot on the sand beneath the moonlight. It was a beginning, a promise, a reclamation of our happiness. A year passed in what felt like an instant. Spring arrived in the quiet suburbs of Los Angeles.